Hi guys, it's Reba. Welcome or welcome back. We are halfway through 2026 and I'm ready to talk about my favorite reads of the year so far. As of June, I've read 23 books. Of those 23, I had a lot of five-star reads. I've had a really great reading year so far. I picked 5 of those five-star reads to talk about today, plus one bonus honorable mention. It's a bonus because this book was a reread. The other 5 books I've selected to talk about are books that I read for the first time. But quickly, I want to mention We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. This is a reread. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time I've read this. This is probably my favorite book of all time. The Twisted Spine, which is a horror bookstore, I think it's in Williamsburg, here in Brooklyn, they have a classic horror book club. And a few months ago they did We Have Always Lived in the Castle for the book club pick. And so I reread it in time to go and participate. And it was so much fun revisiting this and also talking about it with people in real life. This book is, again, a favorite of all time. I think it's absolutely perfect. It's about Mary Cat and her sister Constance and their isolated life up in their house above a village and their contentious relationship with the villagers and other people that try to disrupt their solitude. There's a great twist in the end. It's spooky. It has fun, unique characters. Mary Cat is a icon and an unreliable narrator. I loved rereading it this year and I will do it again. Okay, now on to my 5 favorite books that I read for the first time this year. I'm going to talk about them in the order in which I read them. First being Lucy by Jamaica Kincaid. This book has been recommended to me by many people, both online and in real life, and I'm kicking myself for how long it took me to finally read it. I bought it last year, I think as a birthday gift for myself, and it sat on my shelf for over a year. Finally read it this spring, and I thought it was fantastic. I adored this book, and most of the adoration goes to the main character and narrator, Lucy herself. I think she is another iconic character. You'll see a theme. I really love a good character, a great narrator in the books that I've chosen this year. In this book, we have Lucy, who is a young woman, teenage girl from the West Indies, and she moves to New York to work as an au pair for a wealthy white family. She is bright, she is observant and stubborn and proud, and she has a big heart. She's super compassionate and thoughtful. She harbors some resentment for her mother. She is doing this job as an au pair because it's what's expected of her, and there's this kind of plan for her life that I think feels limiting, especially for someone as smart and bright as her. She feels like her options are quite limited, and she has a really interesting dynamic with one of the employees, the wife of the couple, who I think very much means well, but Lucy is able to call her out on her ignorance. But because she has a kind of difficult relationship with her mother during the book, and doesn't necessarily want to speak to her mom, she, I think, is drawn to, there's like a maternal aspect in her employer, Mariah. And so that makes for this like interesting character relationship. But those kind of complicated relationships, especially between mother and daughter, get me every time. I really love to read them and to find them in books. And so that was definitely provided here. And I think, again, just a really incredibly strong character, powerhouse of a character packed into this slim little novel. I think it's excellent. And if you haven't read this yet, let me be the one to encourage you to do it sooner than later. Next book is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This is another book that came highly recommended to me, and it had a big surge of hype in the last few years, and I think it deserves all of the hype that it got. I'm so glad I finally read this. I think it's a deeply moving, very special novel. It's one of those books where you don't want to know too much about it before picking it up, but I will say I was immediately hooked when I first started reading it. I think it catches you right away and is a really captivating narrative. So it begins in a underground bunker. There's a cage holding some women and guards guarding that cage. These women have some memory of what life was like before being put in the cage, and then eventually a young girl gets locked up with them, and this girl is our narrator. She does not really have any memory of life before, so her perspective on the world is quite unique in comparison to the rest of the women. It creates some tension between them, and then overall an interesting dynamic as they have to navigate the world together. This is a story of survival. The fate of the women changes in an instant because of a miraculous coincidence. And what follows is an exploration of the core of what makes us human when everything else is kind of stripped away. I think Harpman represents this core of being human as resilience and also boundless curiosity, especially for our narrator. She greets the world with wonder and a hunger for learning. And there's also so much reverence for not only life but death in this book. And I think it's such a beautiful, solemn, but moving novel. I think it's really stunning. Excellent. The next book on my list is The Fawn by Magda Szabó. This was my first introduction to Szabó, who I have been wanting to read for some time now, and I am so happy that I did. I think The Fawn is a less popular entry point into Szabó. I think The Door and Catalan Street are more popular. However, as someone who loves a good character, I think The Fawn was excellent and a really great introduction for me. Again, the character is also the narrator of The Fawn. She is magnetic, sharp, unyielding, mysterious. She's a really, really captivating narrator. Her name is Esther. She's a successful actress of the theater. She narrates the story by going back and forth in time, describing a really painful childhood of poverty and loneliness, and also destruction due to war. Because of her past, she harbors a lot of rage and resentment, and she yearns so badly to be loved and to be seen. Her rage is quite palpable in this book. But I think this rage and the hardness she kind of uses as a shell to protect her is also blocking the remorse that I think she still has, and kind of some regret that she has as she tells the story. That starts to bubble up to the surface a little bit. Tonally, this book reminded me of Marilynne by Ingeborg Bachmann, which was one of my favorite books of the last couple of years. I say this because they both have a very melancholy tone, and there's also this tortured woman at the center of the story. Loved The Fawn, can't wait to read more Szabó, and yeah, I think ultimately it was just a really beautifully tragic book. The next book I want to talk about is The Unicorn by Iris Murdoch. Very early on in reading this, I realized that Iris Murdoch might be a new favorite author for me. Even this book alone was enough for me to realize that I really like how Murdoch thinks. I like how she constructs her characters and her worlds and her stories. This is a darkly humorous, mystical, magical book with a cast of oddball characters. Pretty topsy-turvy story, At the start, this novel kind of feels like a murder mystery or a gothic style novel. You have an outsider young woman, governess tutor type, coming to an isolated estate, and the residents of the estate are kind of off kilter. She doesn't really know what to think of them yet. The lady of the house is kind of under house arrest by demands of her husband. She won't leave, she can't leave. There's some mystery surrounding the house and her in general. I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier earlier this year, and I was drawing some parallels to that early on, but quickly the unicorn kind of veers off into another direction, and all of my expectations were overturned and subverted by the end. When I finished this book, I was a bit confused and a little bit like, what happened? Where am I? What am I supposed to think about this? So I did a tiny bit, a very shallow bit of research about Murdoch and her philosophical ideas. She not only has written a lot of novels, but she also taught and wrote philosophy as well. And I suspected that if I learned a little bit more about her in that sense, then I might understand this book a little better. I still love this book, but I would love to learn more, read more, to more fully understand Murdoch. But even with my limited understanding, I still enjoyed this novel and found it so delightful. A lot of the characters in this book were well-meaning and felt some sort of sense of duty to Hannah, who is the lady of the household. But when it came to actually taking action and helping her, they all fell short and were not helpful. I would recommend Iris Murdoch in general. I had a lot of fun with this. Reading this reminded me of reading Shirley Jackson for the first time. This was my first Shirley Jackson, and she's definitely one of my favorite writers. And I had a similar experience reading The Unicorn. Yeah, stay tuned. I will hopefully be telling you more about my reading of Iris Murdoch in the future. And finally, the last book I want to talk about is Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. I just finished this at the end of June, and I loved this book. I absolutely adored this book. It's everything I want in a novel. Oh, this is another one I've been meaning to read for some time now. Loved by many. It's been on my radar for some time now, so I'm so glad I finally read it. I would love to read her Gilead series after this, because I thought this was just so exceptional. Again, everything I want in a novel. There is such beautiful writing in this book. There are amazing, fantastic characters, and also the story is deeply moving. The story centers on Ruth, who is coming of age. She's been raised by kind of a succession of different guardians. She and her sister end up in the family's home in kind of a fictional town in the tippy top of Idaho between Washington and Montana. And in fact, I really enjoyed the writing about the landscape and the town and the house and the world that these characters inhabit. I chose this book for my summer reading challenge. I have a summer reading challenge going on if you would like to join. But one of the prompts for my challenge was a book with a strong sense of place. And this was my selection for that prompt, mainly because I was thinking of it for its aspects around home and making home and housekeeping. But I would say that it's also very strong in its sense of place when it comes to the geographic location of this book. Again, the writing about both the people and the landscape is so stunning, so beautiful. Again, it's about Ruth, but it's also about the generations that came before her. We get some parallels between her relationship with her sister and the relationship between her mother and her own sister, Sylvie, who ends up living with the girls later on in the book. This is, yes, a story about family. It's also about detachment and the beauty that comes with that, but also the loneliness. I think Robinson writes with a really deep wisdom about people and how we fail each other, but how we also need each other so much and need connection. She understands that each individual has their own rhythm and way of moving through life, and she also understands that the bonds of family are very strong and they can't be broken by death or separation. I feel I have to speak so reverently about this book. It has that sort of weight to it for me. It's very heartbreaking. It is sad. It is very melancholy, but absolutely beautiful. Yes, this is an instant favorite, possibly an all-time favorite. I really, really loved it. Those are my favorite books from the year so far. Again, I'm really happy with the quality of books I've been reading. I am excited for the second half of the year and all of the books I have coming up. I love reading in the fall, so I'm really looking forward to that season. I have a lot of good books lined up for me for the rest of the summer. Let me know what books you've loved so far this year. I would love to hear what your favorites are. If you liked this video, give me a like, and please subscribe if you want more videos like this. I'm also doing the Artist's Way this summer, so if you want to see how that's going for me, I am posting my progress with that over the summer. That's it for today. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.